Hello, my name is Murthy Karimela, and as a part of my final project for the course csci e90 fall 2019, I'm creating this presentation where I'm using AWS and Ansible automation as a part of my project. Standard disclaimer, it is only part of my project in Harvard Extension School. I'm using these tools such as Ansible, AWS, and along with the logo such as Harvard logo, you can see it, which belongs to Harvard. Now, let us dive into the agenda. Agenda in front of us is, let us start with DevOps and what are the benefits of DevOps. Later on, we'll talk about introduction to Ansible and high-level overview of what is Ansible is all about, what are the components of Ansible playbooks, and what are the other tools we need as a part of this implementation. Finally, we wrap up with a demo using Ansible in the AWS environment. So what is DevOps? DevOps, as we all know, is a developer operations combination which is going to leverage various tools, technologies, and philosophies. The main objective is to automate the processes and implement the solutions in a consistent manner. That is where we're going to see various tools such as Terraform, Ansible, and so on and so forth. In my case, I'm taking like Ansible. But before going to the Ansible, let us see what are the benefits of DevOps. As we all know, that the main thing is repeatability, speed, and consistency. That is what we are going to look into that from an Ansible perspective. As a part of my implementation, I'm using various tools in my environment like Ansible Engine. Then of course Ansible can be used in a public or private cloud in bare metal or virtual servers. In my case, I'm using AWS EC2 instances to run the Ansible and manage them. Ansible Tower is a production-ready solution which we are not going to see in this demo, but customers can use it for an enterprise production-ready solution. I'm going to use SSH as a part of passwordless authentication to access these managed nodes from my control node. So Ansible is agentless configuration management which is going to leverage SSH instead of passwords. It is all based upon the Python. You don't need to know Python, and it is written in YAML format, and it is very easy to use and understand. There are various components are available as a part of Ansible playbook. For example, tasks. Task is what are the things you want to do as a part of this playbook. Playbook is more like a scripting, what you want to do it. In this case, maybe I want to, let us say, install, maybe I have Apache web server. If I want to install a web server, what are the things I need to do it? Step number 1 could be, for example, downloading the Apache web server. Step number 2 could be like installing it, and step number 3 is starting the particular service. So those are the tasks we are talking about it in this case. As a part of the task, in case something goes wrong, or maybe I want to monitor or maybe manage certain events and capture those events, that is where handlers are coming in. And as a part of my process, let us say I'm going from development to testing, testing to production, and so on and so forth. I may be using various server names, various IP addresses, various locations, passwords, and so on and so forth. That is where variables are coming in. And all my server names and IP addresses, whatnot, I can group them or I can put them in a static way. That is where the inventory file is nothing but a bunch of servers. In case I want to secure my sensitive information such as password, I can use it Vault, which is part of Ansible component. A typical Ansible playbook structure may look like something like this. As you can see here, I have various roles, tasks, handlers, templates, and so on and so forth. Now inventories, as I mentioned before, is nothing but bunch of servers I'm listing in this case, grouping them into different buckets. In my case, for example, host 1 and host 2 are in the web servers bucket. Variables, as I mentioned before, if I want to set up certain values during runtime or based upon the environment, I can do it. For example, port numbers or IP addresses or maybe FTP locations, so on and so forth. Now, vault is basically being used to encrypt a sensitive information. For example, I'm storing my password for a database or maybe password for FTP server and whatnot, and that sensitive information I can encrypt it using Ansible Vault. That is where I can use Ansible Vault command to encrypt my sensitive information, and next time it is going to save that information. It doesn't matter I'm using this component in my private environment or in a public Git repository. So the playbook task, as I mentioned like before, it can be like bunch of tasks what I want to do it. Like step number 1 is download the software, step 2 install it, step number 3 could be configuration. And these tasks could be conditional. Based upon certain conditions I may skip or I may perform certain other tasks as well. This is where I can leverage Ansible, which provides hundreds of modules to perform these tasks. And these tasks pretty much giving us a kind of an orchestration way. If you take playbooks at that one more layer up, abstract layer, that is where roles are coming in. Using the roles, you can pretty much like for example, create a reusable components across different systems and different applications, different customers, and so on and so forth. Now, as we discussed before, handlers are going to respond when a certain event happens. For example, if I am copying a web page to my web server, whenever the particular page is updated or maybe created or whatever, I want to trigger, maybe what I want to do is I want to restart my web server to maybe, for example, to make sure those changes are propagated. In those scenarios, I can use handlers. Now, files is another location pretty much where I'm going to store. For example, the files are required as a part of my task or as a part of my playbooks and so on. For example, if I'm installing let us say a web server, and a web server configuration file, I want to make certain changes based upon the environment, and those files, those configuration files, I can keep it in this folder, quote unquote, files, so that my playbook is going to use it when it's running in a particular environment. Now, Git repository will be used in a typical DevOps way because there you want to maintain the version control, tracking various changes, and so on. Now, as I mentioned before, Ansible Tower is a production-ready solution for enterprises because in enterprises they may use various Ansible engines across different departments, different cost centers, different environments like development, production, and so on. Ansible Tower is a web-based UI where you can execute various Ansible playbooks and based upon job scheduling, or maybe you can monitor how your environment is behaving, and accordingly, proactively, you can maybe run certain playbooks as well. At the end of the day, these playbooks can be executed based upon role-based access control, RBAC in a short form. So DevOps people can use it in a simple button-like a fashion to trigger and run these playbooks. At the end of the day, you can track execution of all the playbooks in a single console. Now, in the demo, what we are going to see in a simple use case where we are going to see, for example, 3 instances have created in AWS. In these 3 EC2 instances, one of them is acting as a control node and remaining 2 are managed host. On the control node, that is where I'm running my Ansible and Ansible commands. And of course, before installing Ansible, I need to make sure it is having proper Python and other packages and so on. Once I created Ansible, second thing what we need to do is like for example, we need to make sure there is a user, quote unquote, ANS admin, like Ansible admin. Ansible admin user I created in all the 3 servers, and I have given the sudo privileges to Ansible admin user ANS admin on the managed host, host 1 and host 2, not on the control node. In the control node, I have created this using SSH keygen. I generated a private key and a public key, and the public key I copied from a control node to the like both the managed nodes. That way I don't need to prompt for the password, I don't need to enter the password. It is automatically log on to those two nodes from my control node. So that is pretty much what I have done. The last step is copying the public key from a control node to remaining two servers in my case. So what is in the scope? In my scope is a very simple one, as you can see, but I didn't include any production ready solution, like for example hundreds of servers, or maybe creating very complex implementation. That is where Ansible Tower is coming in. And of course Git repository is typically recommended for any development in DevOps scenario, but I'm not using that. And you can also see that for example security wise LDAP integration is recommended, but I'm not using LDAP integration. As a part of this implementation, and of course my scope, my prototype is to understand the concept and implement it. And if the time permits, I want to add more functionality and wear more playbooks in the long run. With that said, let us dive into like demo side of it. Now, here you can see like my AWS are already like I've created 3 instances, and you can see that my instances are like host 1 and host 2 are where I'm running my, for example, my web servers, database servers, app servers and whatnot, and control is where I'm running pretty much my Ansible. So these are up and running already. So if you look into the other side of it, I have SSH'd into my EC2 instance. You can see at the top where it is showing EC2 user and with IP address with the control node. So you can see that 3.90.177.216. Same thing, I'm using it to SSH. And you can see here I have 3 tabs. Tab number 1 is a control node with a brownish background, and the greenish the black background is a one managed host 1, and the host 2 is in a somewhat like whitish background. You can see that all the instances I logged in, but I'm going to manage everything from my like control node in this case. So you can see that the user is ANS admin, I logged in. In the same thing for other nodes as well, I created ANS ADM user. From this ANS admin user, from the control node, I can ping remaining 2 hosts. For example, using Ansible all, it means all hosts, and -m is basically a module and a ping. So once I ping these 2, it is going to use SSH keys which I copied, and you can see that it is able to reach both the like manage host 1 and manage host 2. Both of them are like able to read. In a similar fashion, I can execute like any Ansible command. Since now I am able to reach out, I can run the playbooks, I can do anything I want. For example, in this case, I'm running Ansible ad hoc command to use a root sudo privileges. I want to check it out. In this case, you can see that I'm using -b option out here, means become. So I'm becoming a sudo user. So if I click on that, it is going to execute on both the nodes again, node 1 and node 2, and see that it is up and running with the sudo privileges. And what I have done is, as a part of my implementation, is if I list it, you can see that I have one playbook and I also have mg role. Mg role is a role I created, which is basically an abstract layer sitting on top of playbooks. So here an mg role, if I execute and like in the tree structure, let me go back 1 second. Tree mg role. So you can see the structure what we have seen before in the presentation, and the main thing is we are interested in the task, that is the main.yml file. Then of course handlers is another second one, is in case something goes wrong or orchestration events we want to capture. And files is where I typically, as I mentioned, any web server configuration files I want to keep it there, I can use it. And if you look into my playbook, for example, real quick, under more underscore dot task mg role task main, you can see that, for example, typical tasks are task number 1 is, for example, I may be enabling Nginx, and task 2 installing Nginx and copying a file. In this case, I'm copying it from my file. Anyway, that's pretty much like I want to include in this demo, and I hope it helps. Thanks for watching.